welcome to the Dr. Tim Jennings Show, where we seek real answers to life's problems. I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, here with Lori Atkins.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic for discussion today is going to be sleep, which I love. What is normal sleep? Why is it so important? But before we get into that, we wanted to answer a question from a listener. We have a listener, Tracy, who wrote in about your New Testament paraphrase called The Remedy, which I also love. Life-changing paraphrase of the New Testament. Tracy says, I love the Remedy New Testament and was wondering if Dr. Jennings is working on an Old Testament paraphrase.
Well, I've had that question come up many, many times. And so far, I have not really gotten into working on the Old Testament. I had a real conviction that I needed to do this. It took me 13 years to do the New Testament, and I just haven't had that burden put on my heart yet to do the Old Testament.
Well, I know a lot of people would love to get an Old Testament, but if they want to get a copy of this New Testament paraphrase, where can they go to get one?
Well, let me tell them a little bit difference about this one. Yeah. So what makes this different than many translations out there? Every translation of the Bible that's not in the original Greek has been done after Constantine converted.
Okay.
And when Constantine converted, Christianity had a single idea that became a orthodoxy beliefs within Christianity, and that idea is God's law functions like human law, a system of rules that are imposed that require the rule giver to punish breaks in the rule.
Okay.
My view is that God is the creator, the builder of space, time, energy, life itself. His laws are the laws upon which reality are built, like laws of gravity, laws of health, and every Bible translation, the translators with good intention have translated through the lens of imposed law, and thus a lot of legal ideas get woven in through the translation that are not really there. And so this Remedy translation really seeks to repackage it all under the umbrella of design law about how God designed things, and we have a condition which, if unremedied, will result in our death. And God, through his means and mechanisms, ultimately Jesus Christ, has been working to remedy our condition. And thus God is not the one we need protection from, which is what much of Christianity teaches, but we need deliverance from a condition that we can't cure ourselves. And that's the big difference between those. It's very modern English, easy to understand.
Easy to read, easy to understand. I highly recommend it. Okay, so let's talk about sleep.
Yep.
Why is sleep so important? Because I see studies that show, a great number of the population are sleep deprived.
Yeah, there's at least 1 in 3 don't get a normal amount of sleep. And there are 4 physical requirements to life.
Okay.
Requirements to life. Air. I bet you knew that one.
I knew that one.
Water.
Makes sense.
Food. And sleep.
Wow.
It is a physical requirement. And it's surprising how many people don't realize that 4th one.
That it's that critical.
They think you can negotiate with it. Now, you can't negotiate with the others.
Right.
You don't get enough oxygen, you don't get enough water, you don't get enough food, it undermines you get fatigued. You may not die instantly, but functioning is impaired.
Yeah.
Same thing with sleep deprivation. As soon as you're sleep deprived, brain function starts to falter. And the first part of the brain that is impaired with sleep deprivation is the part of the brain behind your forehead.
Yeah.
That's where you reason and think and organize and plan. And it's the part of the brain that gives you a sense of calm and being in control. And it keeps you from being overwhelmed and irritable. And so people who are sleep deprived will be more moody, they'll be more irritable, they'll be less able to problem solve and have more attention and concentration problems.
Well, I mean, don't they compare sleep deprivation? Some of the symptoms mimic being intoxicated.
It can, yes, absolutely. Particularly impairments in operating equipment and stuff. And we now know that some of the most biggest accidents have happened because of operators that were sleep deprived and sleeping at the wheel, so to speak.
Wow. And aren't there some important physiological tasks and things that take place during sleep? Exactly.
So when we're asleep, not only is it required for physical health, but it's during sleep. Your brain is highly metabolic. What I mean by that, it's 1 to 2% of your body weight, but it uses 20% of your body's energy.
Wow.
And as the energy is being burned by your brain, the brain cells have metabolites, byproducts of metabolism, waste products, okay? Those waste products have to be removed. If they're not removed, they can build up and be toxic to the brain. Well, when you sleep at night, the brain cells actually contract and expel out of the inside of the brain cells, the neurons, into the cerebral spinal fluid, the waste products of all that metabolism, so they can be cleared out of the brain. If you don't get normal amounts of sleep, then you don't clear these properly. They can build up slowly over the years, and data shows that people who don't get normal, regular sleep have higher rates of dementia as they age.
Which makes sense.
Additionally, memories consolidate in our sleep. So if you're trying to learn something, it goes into a part of your brain called the hippocampus. I don't know if people want to know that name, but that's like for just immediate retention. But if you want to retain that in your sleep, the things you're trying to learn will be transferred to other parts of your brain for long-term storage. If you don't get normal sleep, it undermines your ability to have good memory retention.
Okay, so that's like in the computer field would be like writing something from RAM memory to the hard drive.
That's exactly what it's
storage.
like. That's exactly what it's like. Absolutely what it's like. And in fact, many of the medicines that are prescribed by doctors for sleep problems chemically interfere with the memory consolidation.
Wow.
And so you may be asleep for a certain number of hours, but if you've been taking certain medicines for many years, you will in fact find that your memory is not as sharp. You're more forgetful. You don't retain the things. And so, and this would be a family of medicines called the benzodiazepines and their sister meds. And this would be things like Xanax, alprazolam, Klonopin, clonazepam, Ambien, Zolpidem, Lunesta, and other in those types of medications, they interfere with memory consolidation. And I think people are aware enough now that they know some of those really cause forgetfulness. I didn't remember what I did.
Right.
Okay? Yes, they absolutely
Even
can do that.
while you're doing it.
So further, they did a study on college students. And and college students are really people who don't understand the importance of sleep.
Notoriously,
yes. And so I tell college students, if you're working hard, you're studying, you've put in eight hours really studying for something. Do you want to be able to remember? You put all that work in. Do you want to retain it?
That's what they're cramming.
Okay.
That's the reason
do you want to know it the next day? Well, then you need to sleep. And so they did a study of college students, and they randomized them into two groups. And they had them have a study period where they memorized made-up words, new made-up words. And then they tested both groups immediately after the study period.
Right.
And then they let one group go and sleep. Another group was kept awake doing various activities for 12 hours.
Yes.
They brought them back 12 hours later, tested both groups again. Not only did the group who slept score better than the group who didn't sleep on return, they scored better than they themselves did immediately after the learning period, and they were tested. So the sleep enhanced their own ability to recall, and that's what happens with sleep. So I tell my college students, look, if you want to have good retention and recollection after you study, you really want to get good, non-medicated, if at all possible, sleep.
Interesting. So what does this mean for, there's some folks out there who work third shift. They work the night shift in their jobs, whether they're nurses and computers, things like that. And notoriously, sleep during the day is not as beneficial.
This is a great question because you're okay, I get my sleep. As long as I'm sleeping 7 to 8 hours, I'm good, right? I'm getting my sleep. I work nights, but I sleep days. Or I have patients work 3 nights a week and sleep 3 days a week, and then they sleep 4 nights a week, and they're constantly flipping, and they have mood problems. They're coming to see me because they're mood unstable. So what you're suggesting, and the data shows, third shift workers who persist in working third shift for more than several years have increased rates of a variety of medical health problems, and they tend to die 6 to 10 years younger than people who don't work third shift. It is physiologically unhealthy to work third shift. The sleep is not as healthy to be out of rhythm with nature's rhythms, the light-wake cycles and so forth. But more than that, most people who work third shift don't even establish a routine of sleeping nights. They're constantly flipping back and forth, which means they put themselves in a constant state of jet lag, where their brain and biorhythms are actually out of phase with what their brain waves and stuff are doing. They're trying to be awake, but there's other circuits of the brain which are trying to put them to sleep. Okay, that's what jet lag is.
Conflict.
Yeah. So and so it's very, very unhealthy for people. to work third shift. And people with mood disorders, I recommend, and I've actually written letters and stuff for my patients that have certain mood disorders, that they're restricted from working third shift, because it's notorious with certain disorders that the third shift worker will have relapses and decompensations and not be able to maintain stability, because sleep is so critical to our mood.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about normal sleep. What does normal sleep look like? Does that mean I go to bed and I fall asleep a few minutes later and wake up 8 hours later and feel refreshed?
So this is what a lot of people think, and I have many people come to see me, but here's what normal sleep is. When you go to sleep, you enter a very light stage. This is when Grandma's snoring in the afternoon on the couch, and you say, Grandma, you're snoring. I wasn't even to sleep yet. Okay, it's very light sleep. Stage 2 sleep, which has some specific things we can see on the EEG, followed by the deep, slow wave sleep. That's where your body temperature falls. That's where your heart rate falls. That's followed by REM, rapid eye movement sleep. That's where we do our dreaming. And then when REM ends, we wake up.
Okay.
And then we go back to stage 1, 2, deep sleep, REM, wake up. Stage 1, 2, deep sleep, REM, wake up all night long. Now, when we're young or really physically exhausted, those wake-ups between REM and stage 1 may only just be a few seconds. We wake up just enough to turn shift, and we're back asleep, and we have amnesia for it.
Right.
So the next day we think we slept all night without a wake-up. It's not true. If you were actually doing brain waves on you, there's a brief wake-up right there. They're awake. Okay? From the time you enter stage 1 until the time you exit a REM cycle is anywhere between 70 and 120 minutes. So if you're waking up every hour and a half to 2 hours through the night, as long as you're able to get back to sleep, that's normal sleep. When we get older, that wake-up period comes with a bladder call. Bladder!
Exactly.
Got to go to the bathroom. And people start thinking, oh, I'm not sleeping well. I need a sleep medication. And they begin medicating normal sleep. And once they begin medicating normal sleep, then they often have more health problems. They're more fatigued. They have concentration problems. They feel hungover. They feel sluggish. Oh, I need something in the morning. I've got to take an extra 3 cups of coffee now. But then they end up medicating something that doesn't need to be medicated. Normal sleep has wake-ups. If you're able to get back to sleep in a reasonable amount of time, a few minutes or so, there is no reason to medicate that. And so once my patients realize that, they stop worrying. They're stressed and anxious. I'm not getting good sleep. I'm not getting good sleep. But once they realize it, they're able to sleep and do better. Historians have now documented, in northern latitudes at least, prior to the age of electricity, sleep had a different pattern.
Okay.
And the way sleep occurred prior to the age of electricity is it would happen in 2 bouts, and they would call it a first sleep and a second sleep. And people would go to sleep shortly after the sun goes down, sleep say from 6 or 7 at night till 10 or 11 at night for 3 to 4 hours, get up for 1 to 3 hours, up from 10 to 1 in the morning, up from 11 to 2 in the morning, and then go back to sleep for another 3 to 4 hours for the second bout. And this is how most people in the northern latitudes slept throughout history up until electricity. And then it was consolidated with electricity. People stayed up later, and they just consolidated it into the 2 bouts into 1. So people think they just have 1 solid sleep. We've come to have this mythos of what sleep is. I actually have one patient who sleeps that way. She sleeps about 4 hours from 7 o'clock to about 11. She's up for 2 or 3 hours in the night, and then sleeps from like 2 in the morning till 6. And it does not need to be medicated.
Interesting.
That is a normal variation or a normal historic way of sleeping. And they've actually done studies in certain primitive societies in the globe still today where they don't have electricity. And in those villages and communities, they still sleep this way in the 2 bouts.
Interesting. Okay, so what if you are waking up in the night and you're up for more than an hour, not in your 2 bouts, but you're really trying to go to sleep?
Well, I would actually say, if again, you have to look at the circumstances and situation. How many total hours are you in the bed at night? I have some patients that are up for an hour, and yet they're still getting a total of 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night.
Okay.
And the really is the total amount. It is enough. 7 to 8 hours is enough sleep for an adult brain. That's what you need as an adult over age 25. Okay, so you get 7 to 8 hours of total sleep. So you'd want to look and evaluate what's going on in that particular circumstance. If they have a pattern historically of waking up, having a bladder call, able to get back to sleep within a few minutes, but now they're up for an hour and a half, and didn't used to be, then there needs to be evaluated. Something changed. Well, menopause. I'm having hot flashes now. Well, menopause is clearly known to affect sleep and sleep architecture, and that can be discussed with the doctor. We have something changed in the environment. I've moved and I've got a noisy environment, and so trains are going by and I can't get back to sleep. I mean, you have to evaluate the variables in the particular person's life that can be contributing.
Okay. And so we mentioned coffee. You mentioned caffeine, an obvious stimulant that sometimes interferes with sleep. Sometimes the temperature of the room.
So let's talk about the coffee for a minute, because I don't think people really appreciate the coffee. And coffee, in various studies, average half-life of caffeine. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it comes from coffee or sodas or wherever. The caffeine has a 6-hour half-life, which means it takes 6 hours to clear 50% of what's in your body out of your body. So let's say you take a cup of coffee 6 a.m. with 100 milligrams of caffeine.
Yeah.
At noon, you'll have 50 milligrams in your system. At 6 p.m., you'll have 25 milligrams in your system. At midnight, you'll have 12.5 milligrams in your system. At 6 a.m., you'll have 6 milligrams in your system next morning. Most people don't know this.
Right.
They think that, and that's if everything's working well.
Yeah.
Okay? If you have a second cup, then that only makes the thing go higher. And people have different sensitivities. Some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others. But one factor, if you have great sleep, you go to sleep easily, you sleep well, you wake refreshed, then if you have a couple cups of coffee, fine, have your cups of coffee, enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Okay? But if you're having sleep problems, you have to take out elements that could be negatively impacting sleep. And some people say, yeah, but I've been drinking 2 cups of coffee for 30 years. Okay, for 30 years. I said, yep, and guess what? You're 30 years older now. And 30 years older means you have more fat on your body. You have less muscle mass. Your kidneys and liver are not as efficient.
Well. Yeah.
So you may actually not be clearing it in 6 hours. You may be clearing it in 8 or 9 hours now. And so you have those 2 cups where you might have only had 20 milligrams or 30 milligrams in your system at midnight from 2 cups, you may have 80 milligrams in your system now. So with age, things have to be reassessed and reevaluated as well. So people need to know that. Many people don't. They think, well, I had it in the morning, it doesn't really matter.
Gotcha. And you've talked about there are benefits from drinking coffee, shown scientific benefits, but if it's impacting sleep, it's better to get the good restorative sleep than it is to get the benefits from drinking coffee.
So the data, multiple studies show that caffeinated coffee, not the decaffeinated form, caffeinated coffee, if you drink moderate amounts of caffeinated coffee, that it lowers all-cause mortality, reduces your risk of Parkinson's disease, reduces your risk of dementia as you age. But there are caveats to the coffee, and that would be, one, if it's negatively interfering with sleep, then you can't benefit from taking it, so you don't want it. And if you have certain circulatory disorders, you may not take it because it can compromise circulation.
Sure.
And if you have seizure disorders, caffeine can lower seizure threshold, make it more easy to have seizures. So if you're having problems with seizure control and you have a seizure disorder, you might need to cut the caffeine out. And basically, there's really no other drink or source of caffeine that has any benefit. Everything else is pretty much harmful, with the exception of green tea.
Okay.
And it's very low in caffeine, but the green tea has shown health benefits. But all of the sources of caffeine are harmful.
Okay. So what are some of the other medical, physical problems? I'm thinking specifically of sleep apnea that may obstruct sleep.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's talk about what sleep apnea actually is. When you sleep apnea is when the soft tissues, and we're talking obstructive sleep apnea, when the soft tissues like your tonsils or your tongue, back of your throat, cover over your windpipe. Okay. So you're asleep and your diaphragm is trying to pull in air, but your windpipe is covered, and so no air comes in, and therefore your oxygen levels in your bloodstream fall. They're in your brainstem has cells that monitor oxygen levels. That's caused that panicky feeling when you hold your breath to your oxygen levels. And so when your oxygen levels fall, that part of your brainstem sends that alarm, scary signal, and you wake up just enough to tighten up the musculature in the back of your throat, and you take a breath, and as soon as you take a breath, the oxygen level increases, those alarm cells turn back off, and you're in and out of stage 1 sleep all night long. Wow. Plus, you're having periods of hypoxia, meaning low oxygen in your blood, and guess what? Your brain likes oxygen, okay? Yes. And with low oxygen, that can be a real problem. And so you're not getting the normal sleep architecture, which means you're not getting the restorative hormones released, you're not getting the memory consolidation happening, you're not getting the actual deep restorative rest for your brain, and this can lead to actually loss of volume in certain brain regions that have been documented with people with obstructive sleep apnea, increased risk of mood disorders and so forth. But the good news is, if you treat it, then all those reverse. The brain volume increases again, and things reverse because you're going through your normal sleep and getting restored. So if people are heavy snorers, symptoms that you might want to look at: heavy snorers, wake up a lot in the night, chronic headaches, chronic fatigue, chronic mood problems, perhaps, overweight or obese. All of these things are factors and symptoms that you might want to consider getting a sleep study and talking to your doctor about that. Okay.
And so what are some of the treatments for sleep apnea? Isn't there
so the most common is called a constant positive airway pressure, CPAP, and it's you wear a little device typically on your nose,
right,
and it just puts positive air pressure that keeps the airways open, so the soft tissues can't close over because there's air pressure keeping it open.
Gotcha. Okay, so you mentioned the deep restorative sleep is where memories are written, but you mentioned that some of the medicines that are actually supposed to help sleep interfere with sleep quality and memory.
Yes, and so I mentioned those benzos, they actually alter sleep architecture and chemically, and then some of the over-the-counter agents in a different way. A classic diphenhydramine, commonly known as Benadryl. Okay, there's many sleep aids.
Yes.
And on an occasion, you're traveling, just sick with the flu, and you need something, perfectly fine.
Right.
No long-term, perfectly fine. But if you're using it every night for sleep, particularly the older you get, it has an effect called an anticholinergic effect, which interferes with a brain chemical called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is one of the brain chemicals that we lose when we get Alzheimer's dementia. Okay, it's important for attention, focus, concentration, memory consolidation. And so the chronic use of, and I say chronic, nightly use every night for years of the diphenhydramine can contribute in a different way to cognitive slowing and memory problems, which generally will improve if you just remove the offending agent.
Right.
Okay, so that would be another factor.
Okay, so if you have someone who is struggling with sleep problems, are there some recommendations you have? How would they go about addressing this?
Yeah, so first thing you want to do is do a little bit of a review. Do an inventory. Look at your sleep environment. Do you have an actual comfortable bed?
Yeah.
Do you have a quiet environment? Do you have a cool environment? Most people sleep better in a cool environment than a hot environment. Have you removed things from your environment that would wake you up? You'd be surprised at how many of my patients come to see me with a sleep problem, and when I take their history of their sleep environment, they have a dog that jumps in and out of bed, or a cat that jumps in and out of bed with them, and I suggest that they put the cat or dog out of their bedroom, and they say, oh, they couldn't do that. They would rather have a drug to drug them rather than to remove the offending agent. No, you need to have an environment where that's conducive to actual sleep and not be interrupted in sleep. Additionally, you need to spend time in the bed if you're having sleep problems. Okay, bed needs to be for sleep and sex. Not for book reading, not for TV watching, not for eating, not for game playing, not for iPad. It's for sleep, because you will condition yourself to get into bed and become awake to do these other activities if you're using it for those other activities. Or establish routines, wake up time and going to bed time.
Okay.
And the anchor one really needs to be your get up time. The human adult brain wants to be awake 16 hours a day. So if you get out of bed at 10 a.m., your brain really won't want to go to sleep till 2 a.m.
Sure.
Okay, it's 16 hours later.
Makes sense.
So you need to anchor your get-up time at whatever your get-up time, and somewhere between 5 and 7 in the morning is really good, and sometimes 8, but not much later. If you're getting up at 8 o'clock, you're really not going to go to bed till 11:30 or midnight most nights. And so if you've got this idea, I need to go to bed at 10, but you're getting up at 8 in the morning, but you get in bed at 10, but I lay in bed for 2 hours. Yeah, because you're getting up at 8, and your brain really doesn't want to go to sleep till midnight. So look at those types of routines. Consider a sound machine. To actually
white noise.
Avoid alcohol as a sleep promoting agent because it actually interferes with sleep architecture. If you've done many of these things, and it's still not working, consider talking to your doctor and getting a professional evaluation.
All excellent recommendations. Thank you for that information. If you want to find out more about sleep, go to timjenningsmd.com. Lots of resources there at the website. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Dr. Tim Jennings Show.